why is it so silly, the idea that somebody in the developing world, let's say president of Mozambique, president of wherever it is, looks towards the United States, looks towards the international system, hears them say, we should, respect sovereignty, respect everyone's international borders. We need to respect the international rules-based order, which is the terminology the United States government uses. And then we'll violate the rules of that order a year later once it suits them. Will they come away with the conclusion that this is an order that we should uphold, or this is all stupid? Politics
I don't know if people look at it as
like
just like the international rules-based order. I don't think it's just like looked at in terms of like what are the actual international courts saying or whatever. Because like technically not technically, like the USS doesn't even submit itself to the authority of the ICC, right? I think that people are generally looking for...
This is something that I also think is hypocritical and we need to fix.
Sure. Maybe.
I mean,
wait, let me respond to what you said. Hold on. Whoa, hold on. You're doing the ramble. You're talking a lot. Okay, so I'm going to steal that, okay?
Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about the Golan Heights, if you wanted to talk about that quick. I can't hear you. Give me a moment.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Jesus. I don't know if this mic is going out or the mixer is, or the XLR cable, or your mom. Okay. I'm so sorry. Oh, yeah. I've been just working, studying, reading. You want to talk about the Golan Heights. What's up?
Yeah, well, not just the Golan Heights. I wanted to ask you a few things. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is about the settlements, because as far as I know, you're like against the settlements, yeah?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, because we had this interaction about a UN resolution that was passed, and there was two parts of the UN resolution. The first part of it was the condemnation of the continued expansion of settlements, and it specifically had to do with that in the Golan Heights. And one second, the second part had to do, well, it was basically settlements, and then more specifically settlements in the Golan Heights. And you said that the resolution was stupid, and because the Arab states don't want the Palestinians anyway. Could you like expand to me exactly like why the UN resolution was stupid?
Wait, can you link it? I thought that this also was a reaffirmation of Resolution 242. That's generally what I was referring to. Is that wrong, or did I fuck this up? Or you can DM me the tweet and I can look at it again real quick.
Okay, I can DM you the tweet and I can DM you the resolution stuff, so you remember what resolution it is. One moment. This one right here. And here's all the information on the resolution.
I love you, like, and be careful.
And if you want to search specifically in that UN document about where it's a big document about a bunch of different resolutions. It is down like I think like 7 or 8 paragraphs. It starts by the terms of the occupied Syrian Golan.
Didn't this also have to do with the territories of like the West Bank and the Gaza Strip as well?
Well, there's different parts of it. There's part of it that has to do with specifically desisting from changes to the character of the Golan Heights, the currently occupied Golan Heights, like its demographics, its institutional structures, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, don't put settlements here, and don't make an attempt to change the demographics of the area, which would make it easier for Israel to annex it.
Sure. I mean, I broadly agree with like not doing settlements. I just think that any resolution talking about like, oh, like Israel needs to give back all this territory is just like retarded. Like nobody, it's not like a realistic solution.
So
yeah, go ahead.
This is why I was confused, and this is why I wanted to understand your objection to it, because as far as I know, you've always been against the settlements. And as far as I know, you want the Israelis eventually to come to a deal with the Arab states. So I didn't understand why a UN resolution, which the only two opponents of it was the United States and Israel. I think, at least when it comes to the Golan part, the second part, I think it included the Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia, like a bunch of smaller nations, and Hungary, and Canada, I think. I was confused because it seemed to be in line with what you've always supported, which is stopping the expansion of settlements, because it's just going to make it much harder to make a deal, and it just increases the territory that the Palestinians won't be able to live on, increasing the amount of stateless people.
Yeah, I'm opposed to the expansion of settlements. I just don't know why people are trying to make like large agreements on this, and then trying to say like also in this like, oh, and Israel should do all of these things, like give back all of the, I don't even know who you'd give it back to, all of the conquered territory or whatever. I just don't like these like really broad resolutions that are.
Well, there's different parts of the resolution, right? For example, the occupied Syrian Golan part, there was only 2 people voted against it, and it was the United States and Israel. Whereas the other part that specifically had to do with Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories, East Jerusalem, and the Syrian Golan, that had more votes against it. Canada, Hungary, Israel, the Marshall Islands, because it was more expansive and it covered more issues, including the West Bank and Jerusalem, which caused Canada and Hungary to jump off the ship, where they more agreed with, yeah, they shouldn't be settling in the Golan Heights. And so this did give America more selection on where it could agree with Israel, where it could disagree with Israel, but we just agreed with Israel on both counts.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm opposed to the settlements, but I think that like any change in Israeli policy, I think has to come with like agreements with other parties. Like it can't just be Israel unilaterally pulling back from here or doing this particular thing. Like, let's say Israel unilaterally pulls out of, or well, I'm saying unilateral, I don't know if it's really unilateral, but Israel is through UN condemnation pulls back from the Golan Heights, and then the Golan Heights just becomes another area by which Syria or Hezbollah decides to just start bombing Israel again, right? Well, I was like, well, what the fuck? What do we just get for this? What's the point of this? Like, it's easy to do.
I agree with you. I agree with you on that. I don't think Israel should just tomorrow pull out of the Golan Heights. It probably would just become a hub for terror groups, considering the current state of Syria. What I do think, though, is that the more that they place settlers in there, the more settlers move in, or the more provocation settlers have with the UN area where the UN soldiers are, that separates where the Syrian soldiers are and the Israeli soldiers are, the more that occurs and the less Israel does to discourage that, the harder it's going to be to eventually make a deal that is beneficial, well, not beneficial, but acceptable, tolerable to all sides. Because the longer this goes on, the harder it's going to be for Israel to ever make the decision to pull out, which means they're going to have less to offer at the negotiating table. It's going to make it harder to come to a
deal.
And
I definitely understand that, and I'm sympathetic towards that. But on the side of the Israeli argument, their argument is going to be the only way we've ever been able to get peace with anybody is through conquest and might. And if we don't settle, if we don't have this territory, if we don't do things to make it hard for other people, then they have absolutely no reason to negotiate with us. Let's say that in the future, let's say Israel wants to come to some strong agreement.
Okay, but I think when it comes to the Golan Heights, it's a little different because Israel has offered the Golan Heights before, but the Syrians didn't accept the terms. They didn't think they were tolerable because they wanted no Syrian soldiers, no Syrian bases. I mean, no Israeli soldiers, no Israeli bases, no Israeli air control. And now that position has changed because the Likud is in power, and since then Israel has decided to annex the Golan Heights. So I agree.
Well, when you
that
say now the
Israel,
position has changed, now the position has changed to what?
The Israeli government position has changed to how they should treat the Golan Heights. Now they treat it as sovereign Israeli territory, even though no other state except the United States, which happened during the Trump administration, acknowledges that.
Sure. But I'm saying that, like, from Israel's point of view, there's no reason to give this up without, like, a strong negotiation on the table. Right? Do you agree with that or no?
I understand that there's no reason for them to give it up.
Okay.
But the more they settle, the harder it's going to be to ever give it up, period. And they won't be able to make the same offers they made before, making peace less attainable.
Sure, I understand that, but it only gets better for Israel as they continue to settle the territory, right? It only gives them a stronger bargaining position by doing that. And if they feel like they have enemies to the north and the only thing they recognize is threat of annexation or military might, then that's in Israel's prerogative to do this. And if nobody else wants to negotiate, if they didn't in the past, right? They didn't even want, yeah.
It's harder for me to think it's going to be a stronger negotiating position because at a certain point, once they've done enough settlement, there's not going to be a negotiation about returning the Golan Heights. They're just going to keep the Golan Heights. I don't think that the Likud's agenda is to move in a bunch of settlers and then leverage, much of the settlers being their far-right base, leverage those people who support them and keep them in power, leverage them against the Syrians to get a better deal and then eventually pull them out. I think their goal is to move in settlers and then never let go of the Golan Heights ever. I think that would make much more sense considering like Likud's agenda.
Possibly, I might agree with you there. I would argue historically this isn't relevant, but historically Israel was willing to demolish settlements when they made peace with Israel and give them back to Sinai, and Israel under, I think it was Sharon, not Netanyahu. I think it was under Sharon, unilaterally disengaged from Gaza and they pulled back settlements from there. So historically they've been able to do it. Now, in both of those cases, it wasn't, 25,000 settlers in the Golan Heights? It wasn't that many people. But I mean, Israel has the capability of doing it. I just don't see how, like, I don't like going to Israel and saying like, you need to do this, you need to do that. Meanwhile, like there's like terrorist groups that are attacking them constantly. And they're like, okay, well, we need something from them. We're not just going to disengage or stop moving here. Like we are going to move to annex the territory if somebody else doesn't like do something about it. Yeah.
But continued expansion of settlements isn't going to decrease the amount of terrorism or decrease tensions or make Israelis safer. It's just going to make those settlers, they're going to put them in positions where they're more in danger. They're going to put more Israeli soldiers in the Golan Heights in danger. And it's going to end up making it harder for Israel to come to terms that makes it more peaceful for everyone. So I don't necessarily think that the settlement of the Golan Heights is benefiting Israel as much as controlling the Golan Heights territorially is benefiting Israel's security, which I can understand that. That's much easier to understand.
I actually think I 95% agree with you. I think that Israel right now is conducting themselves like the year is 1968, and they're worried about every country invading them again. Like it feels like Israel acts a little bit more on edge than they need to. That being said, if anybody
can I ask you a question? How much of that do you think is Netanyahu, and how much of that do you think would be the case no matter who was in power? Because I think if it was Benny Gantz in there, I don't think the position of like what they're doing right now would change that much tremendously.
Well, yeah, but it's because probably it's largely in provocation to Palestinian attacks. That's why the general sentiment in Israel is, fuck these people, we don't want to work with them. And broadly speaking, I think that's the feeling around basically the entire Arab world. Nobody cares about Palestinians anymore. The citizens kind of do. But for the most part, people have kind of moved on. That's why the only people supporting the Palestinians now are fucking Islamic jihadists. It's Iran, it's Hezbollah, it's the Houthis, and then it's whatever Hamas crazy shit is happening. And even the PA is pretty fucking crazy in Israel. So yeah, their support has become increasingly radicalized. A lot of the other Arab nations have taken a step back or are bilaterally negotiating peace with Israel. And increasingly, yeah, the Palestinians are finding themselves with only more and more radical allies. So when Israel looks at that, like, yeah, there needs to be like a real conversation about if Israel wants to give this back, what are they going to get in exchange for it? Who's going to, like, what are we doing about Iran? Because that's the big fucking deal. Or at the very least, like Syria and Lebanon. Yeah.
Let's be clear. We're talking about the Golan Heights here. This isn't a question of giving the Golan Heights back to the Palestinians. This is a question of giving the Golan Heights back to the Syrians.
Yeah, but I don't know if they're. You can tell me here. I don't know historically. Like, what would the chances be if the Syrian government got back the Golan Heights? What are the chances that somebody like Hezbollah like moves in there and uses it as a base of operations? And then what are the chances that Assad would even be able to control that situation?
That's the two things that I wanted to bring up. This is why I'm not in favor of Israel giving back the Golan Heights right now, but I am in favor of them stopping settlement. Because I don't think the current status of the Syrian civil war or just Assad's brutality, even though I think that's less of a concern for the Israeli government, considering the other actors in the region they're willing to work with, I don't think it would be beneficial for Israel. I don't think it would be necessarily that beneficial for the Syrians. I think it would probably just be filled with terror groups very quickly. As actually happened early in the Syrian civil war, which made the UN peacekeepers flee the area between the Israeli government and the Syrian government. But what I do think is that the more settlers they put there, the harder it's going to come to a deal. And in the long term, no matter how the Syrian civil war ends, whether it's an Assad's government, whether it's a free... Yeah?
Someone said, by one tier 5 sub, if you can name one Israeli city besides Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. Does the West Bank count? What about like Bethlehem or Ramallah or I think Haifa, Jaffa? These are districts of Tel Aviv. Fuck you. Give me my shit. Oh, Lod, L-O-D is one. Fuck you. Give me my tier 5 sub, motherfucker. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
The most fun I've been having learning more and more about Israel is just learning fun Hebrew words.
Yeah.
Like shmekel. It's great.
I didn't know. I'm going to be totally honest. I didn't know that the Israeli currency was actually called shekels. I thought that was just like a Nazi fucking meme. I didn't know even today they're still called new shekels.
It is shekels.
Jesus. Okay, sorry. Keep going.
But in the long term, when Israel eventually comes to the table with whatever future Syrian government that is, hopefully not Assad's, if there are settlers in the Golan Heights that number 100,000, 200,000 instead of the 20 to 25,000 that currently are in the Golan Heights, it's going to be 10 times harder for them to come to a settlement, especially if those settlers or the parties that those settlers support have political influence in maybe not a Likud coalition, but any coalition.
Sure. But then that would be, then Israel would say, okay, well, negotiate with us now then before it happens. Because the pressure is mounting. We're going to keep moving settlers in. So negotiate. You still don't want to negotiate? Okay, we'll see if you do it at 50,000.
But the problem is that the current government doesn't want to ever negotiate its release because it believes that the Golan Heights is sovereign Israeli clay. Do you disagree that Israel formally annexed the Golan Heights, and then Donald Trump's presidency acknowledged it. So
Sure, which is stupid, yeah. But I mean, like, Israel also...
And if any government was to really believe that, it would be Netanyahu's.
Sure, but Zionists also have historically recognized that Jerusalem is like the sole right to Jewish people, but there have been multiple deals on the table that have like split East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem and made administrative districts, but like internationally, blah, blah, blah. So like...
I'm not saying that it would be impossible for any Israeli government to make this deal. I am saying that this specific government probably would never make that deal because they don't want to make that deal. And if continued settlement expansion happens, it's going to make it harder for any government to make that deal.
Sure. Here's what I would say. Stopping or pulling out the settlements from the Golan Heights serves zero strategic or geopolitical interest whatsoever, I think, for Israel. Increasing them there creates mounting pressure for, I don't even know if Lebanon exists as a fucking government or if it's just Hezbollah, or Syria, which I don't know if that government exists right now or if it's just a collection of fractured terror groups as the country tries to rebuild itself, right? But until these two countries at the very least are willing to create some sort of agreement or some sort of security, whatever, with Israel, I don't think Israel has any motivation whatsoever to say like, okay, we're going to go ahead and stop the settlements and start to pull them out and blah, blah, blah. I just don't see, like maybe morally it's the right thing to do, but like strategically,
I don't think that having more people in the Golan Heights, if it depends on what your goal is. If your goal is just to grab as much territory as possible, then there's zero motivation to stop settlement expansion. If you just think that the territorial hold is security and they hold the Golan Heights, whether it's respected or not respected, that's security. If that's your primary goal and it's considering Netanyahu as the security candidate, that wouldn't surprise me that much, then I would understand not wanting that.
Sure, I think the aspirations are territorial. At this point, I'm sorry, I love my Zionists. Security is a pretty weak argument. It's 2023. We got nukes, we got planes, we got all sorts of shit going on. I don't think the security argument for the Golan, like, is it 1955? Are they going to park artillery there and start shooting? Like, I think the security argument is weak and Israel makes it, yeah.
The Golan Heights was used as a base of operations to launch an invasion of Israel during the Yom Kippur. Well, no, it wasn't during the Yom Kippur War. It was the 1967 war, and then it was tried to be retaken by the Syrians.
Sure, I understand that, but I'm just saying that like we don't live in a world, because I think that Israel has a problem. This is why I say Israel is stuck in 1968, where they feel like they're surrounded by enemies on all sides, and they've got to be ready for war and attacks and blah, blah, blah. If Israel here's something I say with extreme confidence, okay? Maybe I'm wrong. If Israel gave the Golan Heights back and some group started to stage like attacks out of the Golan Heights, Israel would fucking demolish it. It wouldn't even be like it's not even a strategic threat. Like, people are acting like it's 1950 and there's going to be like artillery firing shells and oh my God, and what is Israel going to do? I don't think that's true anymore. I could be wrong, but I seriously don't think that's true. I think Israel could deal with it. Proactively,
I generally agree with you. I would say that a state still wants to protect itself from threats that won't annihilate it, but could still damage it, could still hurt its people. So there's still a motivation, right? Like if we knew that there was going to be some ISIS attack on the United States, we wouldn't do nothing because we was like, this isn't going to destroy us, right? And so Israel still has a desire to try to protect itself from that type of attack.
I understand what you're saying, but when I look at Israel's action since 2006, okay, we pulled out of there's disengagement from Gaza, okay, all of those were done. Only anybody that says it was for peace is lying. It was done to shore up the demographic majority of Israel. Number one, we look at the expansion of settlements in the West Bank, which is strengthening Israel's right to annex it, and it's strengthening the territorial claims they can make for any agreement. And then you look at them annexing the Golan Heights and doing settlements up there. It's territorial. I don't think that these are. I don't think there are security, because it weakens their security in some respects. Like, yeah.
This was the point I wanted to come around to. I do think it's territorial, and I think at the end of the day, Israel is going to kind of embed so many conflicts in a way that makes it impossible or near impossible to resolve through mass expansion of settlements, through continued occupation of the land with no consideration of trying to come to a deal. If that continues for a long enough period of time, then I think it's only inevitable until either the displaced people who are stateless, or different terror groups, or others who are feeling the repercussions of those types of occupations, or feeling the repercussions of that type of expansion of settlement, leads to another mass attack, leads to another October 7th, and then it leads to another wave of violence. And I think settlement is the key potential like lightning rods for starting another wave of violence.
Yeah, but so here's the huge problem right now that I think exists with Israel and Palestine, okay? Is one side lives in reality, which is Israel. The other side lives in delusion, which is Palestine. And they both have the shared belief that continued conflict will benefit their side. Palestinians think if they keep fighting, it will help. And Israelis think if they keep fighting, it'll help. It probably does help Israel. It almost certainly is not helping Palestinians. And I think that's one of the huge contributors to both sides not really, like, the push push for peace is not going to come from Israel, especially after October 7th. They're not going to push. They don't give a fuck. Also because the status quo benefits Israel. They're expanding territorial settlements. Their economy is growing. All these other Arab nations are falling like dominoes to sign up for peace deals with them. Like, yeah, they're doing fine. The Palestinians, on the other hand, have been trained to fight against Israel and struggle against the Jews for 75 fucking years. They're not going to look for peace because that's all they know is fighting. So what do you at that point? Yeah.
I would disagree with the classification of like the Israelis live in reality while the soy Palestinians live in reality.
Palestinians they're delusional. The Palestinian fight went from a territorial conquest from territorial kicking out European settlers, which was noble. From 48 onwards, fuck it, yeah, kill those fucking Jewish settlers and the European settlers. I support it, but it's jihadist Islamist shit now. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I think it's delusional, the approach of Netanyahu's government, for example, the current administration, towards the Palestinians, and how he thought that this could basically just be the state of affairs forever. That, you know, he could perpetuate this conflict forever, and that he could kind of, we can move these troops away from the border with the Gaza Strip. We can manage our relationship with Hamas, and we can keep this conflict going in perpetuity, and not expecting like something like this to happen eventually, especially as he let his defenses down in the Gaza Strip and failed as the security candidate, as the person with the most experience in the history of the country in the position of prime minister. I do think that position of keeping this conflict forever just going on, we can live with it. I do think that is a little, what was the word you used?
Delusional?
Delusional.
Wait,
yes.
Why do you think it's delusional though? Do you think Israel?
I don't think that keeping the conflict going on in perpetuity is going to keep Jews or Israelis safe. As October 7th showed.
Whoa. We're not talking about keeping Jews or Israelis safe. We're talking about strengthening the country of Israel as a whole. Since 2006, whose position has...
Wait.
Yeah.
Netanyahu's candidacy and his government was based upon security. He was a security candidate. If you go look at all of his ads, it's all about keeping people safe. There's like this ad of him like at the beach, watching people play volleyball, watching everything happening, making sure everybody's safe. If that's your position...
Hold on, real quick. When I analyze political leaders and what they're doing, I'm looking at actions, not advertisements. If Netanyahu wanted more security, he'd pull all the settlers out of the West Bank and there wouldn't be any more violence between settlers and Palestinians anymore. Clearly, keeping Israeli people safe is not his priority. I think a dual priority, a big part, is territorial expansion in this part.
Would you not say that...
Just a real quick claim on one thing to say. Real quick. From 2006 onwards, here, write this down. You can ask me whatever. From 2006 and onwards, the status quo of Israel fighting with Palestinians has been maintained. Who's benefited from 2006 onwards? Whose position is strengthened? Israel's or the Palestinians?
1 second. Oh, sorry, I was writing the question down.
Sorry.
Say that again.
Or you can do your point first, and I'll ask you this. Go ahead.
The Israelis. Fuck. Okay, I just lost all of it. Just ask me your question again.
No, wait. Hold on. We were talking, and you were saying Netanyahu's government. He said in political ads.
Wait. Yeah. Okay, so the question was whether Palestinians or Israelis are delusional. I think there's delusion on both sides, and if somebody is voting for Netanyahu as a security candidate under the idea and supporting his coalition under the idea that keeping the conflict in perpetuity, keeping the conflict managed with the security wall, with the security state, and not coming to a settlement, not creating some sort of state for the Palestinians, that is what would keep the most Jews and most Israelis safe. That is what's best for them from a security standpoint. I do think that's delusional.
Okay, so then here's my question. This has more or less been the status quo for the past 15, 16, 17 years, since 2006, about. Whose position has improved over the last about 20 years? Israel's or Palestine's?
You mean like security-wise?
Everything-wise, just like everything.
Well, then the Israelis, obviously.
Yeah, Israel in every size, shape, and form. Right? They've made more allies. They've strengthened their relationship with other actors in the Middle East. They've expanded their settlements everywhere. Their economies continue to grow. Their relationship with the rest of the world remains, even past, all of the individual conflicts, remains relatively good. Like, Israel's position has only improved. The Palestinian position has drastically fallen. Gaza Strip is becoming overpopulated. They're still embargoed and nobody gives a fuck about it, or blockaded, and nobody really cares that much to do anything about it. They're losing allies except for terrorist groups. Hamas is literally, the Palestinian position has gotten more and more dire over time. Who's delusional when both sides are saying, let's keep fighting and we'll do better? Only one side can be right when that's the statement and the policy of both sides, I think.
Well, okay, I think there's different ways of delusion, right? Different countries have different delusional like views of their own history, for example. Like there's different like delusional like narratives that nations have about what they did or what they can achieve or what's special about their country. So I guess when I hear like Palestinians are delusional, where like, Israelis live in reality, I think we're talking about two different subjects being deluded about two separate
I mean,
issues.
I'd say deluded in every sense of the word. I would say they tend to be violent. They support radical jihad Islamists. I would say that their choices on leadership has consistently been fucking horrible. Their outlook on the war and October 7th is insane. Like, I would say in almost every sense, the average Palestinian, I know that people like to do this thing where like, oh no, it's just Hamas is bad. No, the average Palestinian is mind-fucked right now. At the very least, almost all of them in the Gaza Strip are, if for no other reason, because Hamas literally educates them with programs of like Mickey Mouse the Jew goes to like murder Goofy, the poor Hamas fucking person. Like, it's insane, the level of like insanity that exists. Not to the Palestinians' fault, by the way. The rest of the Arab nation hyped them up for fucking 70 years to fight Israel, and they basically all left. So I don't blame the Palestinians, but like, I think they are in a state of delusion, and that has to be addressed or brought back from the brink if any like peaceful process is ever going to be pursued, I think. Because the status quo right now, you agree, the status quo supports Israel.
Well, the status quo supports, it depends on what your goal for an Israeli state to be, but the status quo supports Israel winning in any conflict. If any long-term conflict, as long as they don't get tired, then they'll win in in any general conflict. Yes. Yeah.
So the push has to come from the Palestinian side, and I don't know how that's going to happen right now, right?
So I think that there has to be an acceptance that Israel is going to exist in the region in some shape and form, and there has to be a deal made with Israel. Mm-hmm. I do think that is something that people have to accept, whether they like it or not. You have to live in the real world. I do think, though, that there is some sort of, I don't want to get too stuck on delusion, because I would just talk about these elected MPs are delusional. Look at the crazy stuff they're saying. Here's these fringe parties over here that have an immense amount of influence within Netanyahu's coalition, and here's the violent things they say. Here's the agriculture minister saying we can use a nuke in the Gaza Strip. I want to avoid, I feel like we're just going to go back and forth with like whataboutism, and I don't want to do that. Can we move on to...
Sure, yeah. Just to be clear also, yeah, when we argue about these things, I'm not looking at like, people like to make these arguments of like, here's what a minister said, or here is what the interior defense guy said, or here. I'm not looking at like statements. I'm looking at like, what are the actions of the country? Yeah.
This, I feel like we've kind of avoided the whole point of this conversation, by the way. My position wasn't whether or not, from a security perspective, not what's best for international law, what's best for, you know, actually having peace and no sort of like version of like waves of violence. My original question about this was whether it was a good idea for the United States, as an advocate of the international rules-based order, to vote against resolutions that are asking for Israel to uphold the international rules-based order, which basically every international law scholar acknowledges that they're violating.
I don't know if every single law scholar acknowledges they're violating it, but no, I don't think Israel is held.
Wait. If we're talking about settlement expansion in the illegally occupied Golan Heights, is there any international law scholar that's going to say that's legal under international law?
It's complicated. All these issues are really complicated.
Wait. That's not a complicated question, though. Is there any international law scholar who would say that it is legal under international law to put settlements in the occupied Golan Heights? If we said this about like occupied Ukraine, this wouldn't be a question, right? If we said this about any occupied territory, it wouldn't be a question.
I know for the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, it's different. I don't think I can't venture an opinion on the Golan Heights. I would have to read specifically about that, because technically the Golan Heights was taken in 1967, right?
Yeah, 1967 and fought over again in 1973.
Golan Heights was, hold on, I'm trying to remember. Was the Golan Heights part of Syria proper?
Yes, it was.
From 48 onwards?
It was like the Syrian Arab Republic, and then there's like I think it was like an Egyptian Syrian like union thing that Nasser wanted to try because he's just wacky and funky, but it was part of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Okay, let me just double check. Yeah, the Golan Heights might be different here then from the West Bank or the Gaza Strip then.
Well, yeah, it was part of a separate. Yes, it was part of a separate country. This is why I'm saying that no international law scholar would say it's legal. Now you can make an argument like, I don't care if it's legal. I don't care about that international rules-based order. I think the security purposes, that argument can be made. My point is that the United States is making a lot of moral stands in the world right now. A good example would be in Ukraine, and I have to talk about this a lot. And I'm very concerned that when I'm talking to people, when I'm talking to my Lebanese friends, because I know some Lebanese Ukrainian people, or I'm talking to some other people from other parts of the world that are not traditionally considered the quote-unquote West, and I'll talk to them about Ukraine. They'll be like, yeah, it's good that the United States support Ukraine. I guess it's bad the Russians invaded, but like the United States is obviously hypocritical. Look at them violating international law here. Look at them violating international law here. If there's going to be a quote unquote night watchman or somebody that stands up for this rules-based order, which the Biden administration espouses it's standing for, it has to be able to stand with it consistently. It cannot just be like, of course I'm going to apply the rules when it comes to my enemies, but the people I give weapons directly to, no. We're not going to do reviews on their weapon usage. We're not going to do reviews on whether they're following the laws of war, which I know that State Department officials have resigned over the fact that they're not doing that. And Anthony Blinken and others have yet to indicate that they are doing that. And so that just makes me very concerned when I see the UN voting against these UN resolutions.
But it's also so weird.
I think it's going to hurt our credibility around the world.
It's possible that it might hurt our credibility. I'm not sure how much stuff related to Israel hurts our credibility around the world, as opposed to stuff related to like Ukraine, which is in a far more reasonable region of the world, as crazy as Putin is. The international law claims and the UN resolution claims relating to conflicts involving Israel, they seem to fall so hollow when it feels like nobody else around them is held to any of these standards. Like, if we pull back in a macro, here's what we're saying. Israel, you guys are violating international laws by building settlements on this occupied territory. You need to give it back to Bashar al-Assad that used chemical warfare against his own citizens over and over and over and over again. You're really bad. Like that, argument.
That's not what the UN resolution said. The UN resolution simply said to stop settlement expansion in occupied territory, not to give it back.
Yeah, but again, like even to stop, okay, not to give it back, but even to stop settlement expansion, stop expanding the settlements. Like, you need to adhere to international law when the people that are boarding you clearly have no fucking concern for it whatsoever.
But this is the problem. Israel espouses to be a Western-style democracy. It often claims to be the only democracy in the Middle East. When it tells its national story, the UN resolution creating Israel, creating a home for the Jews after the horrors of the Holocaust, that's largely part of their national story. That's part of the justification for the foundation of the Zionist project, for the foundation of the Israeli state. And to use these international institutions, to use international law when it's to your advantage, but then to disregard it because the other team also isn't playing by the rules, and for us to stand with them discarding it while their team doesn't play by the rules, while we stand for the system on the international stage, it just seems horribly hypocritical, and I think it's going to hurt our image, and I think this is one of the weakness of a lot of people, and I don't hate to use the word developing countries, but I don't know how else to say it to get it across to people. It worries me when developing countries sees these flaws or see these obvious hypocrisies in the idea of an international rules-based order, and then they'll listen to other world leaders like Vladimir Putin, who make a much more cynical observation of like, they play by the rules when it suits them, they don't play by the rules when it doesn't. That's how we should all play by the rules, which is what I'm getting from his commentary around the war in Gaza.
Sure, and I mean, we can examine that, but like anybody seriously looking at Israel, surrounded by a host of countries that have never given a fuck about international rules, that have never truly endorsed Resolution 242, that have had explicit statements in the past to never like even recognize Israel exists as a country, because their conflict so far has been so bad or gone so poorly, to say that Israel now needs to strictly adhere to international law and needs to strictly adhere to the rules in this area. Like, again, in terms of like morally, I can see an argument for it, but like realistically, realpolitik or whatever the fuck, like looking at Israel's actions and the neighbors that surround it, like it's hard for me to condemn. Yeah, okay. And I don't believe. Hold on, wait, real quick. I don't believe that the United States loses credibility for that in the eyes of Putin when the U.S. is supporting Israel, that has historically had an unbelievably unique history in the Middle East.
I'm saying losing. That's not what I said. I didn't say losing
you made it sound
credibility in the eyes of Putin. I'm saying that the developing world.
No. Losing credibility in the eyes of the rest of the world.
Yes, I do think that we're losing credibility. If we're trying to say we're not like the Russians, we don't build empire, we stand for an international rules-based order, we believe that's what's best for nation states, but then disregard that order when it comes to some of our key allies like Israel, I do think that hurts the reputation of what we're supposedly trying to stand for. And I think that it is like you said, if you're just realpolitiking it, then you're realpolitiking it. But that's not what the Biden administration, that's not what Anthony Blinken, that's not what Jake Sullivan, that's not what the State Department is claiming to do. Henry Kissinger's dead. I don't think they're taking the realpolitik approach.
Sure. I mean, I'm not arguing that like Realpolitik is like a good way to approach the world, or is like a morally justifiable way to approach the world. I'm just saying that surrounded by the people that they are, I find it uncompelling to say that Israel should be forced to adhere to some particular tenet of international. I'm not even sure 100% of they're violating. Also, I still don't know 100% if that's even true. And I don't believe that the United States is losing. I'm telling
you, man.
Shoot, you should shoot me.
You've acknowledged in the past that the settlements are illegal. I thought.
That was before I knew anything about international law and how much of a clusterfuck it is. If you want to shoot me articles on it, I'll read it. I've got a ton of stuff up right now that I want to like read and research more relating to international law, because I don't have, my opinions on here aren't that strong. It might be, for instance, that Israel is 100% acting illegally in regards to the Golan Heights. But I just like, on the macro, broadly speaking, I am wholly uninterested with the condemnations or encouragements of like action from Israel that is taken without other states surrounding them being involved. I'm so wholly uninterested in it. I don't think it's done in good faith. I don't think like African countries or developing world is going to look at the United States and go like, oh my God, they're so hypocritical in Israel. Let's go do Putin. Maybe we can do a third Chechen war. Like, I don't think that would ever happen.
What I'm saying is that if you look at the world's rules that we're supposedly holding up, and we're holding up above everyone else, and we're saying these are the rules that they should follow, which is the system that, and I'm not saying specifically the system built currently, but I do believe there should be some sort of international rules-based order, which is what the Biden administration also believes. If you're going to do this, it cannot just be when the rules apply to me, I follow them. When the rules apply to them, when the rules apply to them, we enforce them. When the rules apply to me, never mind, we ignore them. And I'm not advocating. I'm just talking about the United States' position. It would not hurt the United States that tremendously to say, yes, I'm going to vote against settlement expansion. Yes, I'm going to vote against settlement expansion in the Golan Heights. I'm going to vote against continued settlement expansion here. It would not hurt us strategically. We would still probably have a very positive relationship with Israel overall, considering how much they need the United States right now. And it's not like it's impossible for the United States president to do this. Ronald Reagan did cancel F-16 shipments to Israel back in the day over its bombing campaign in Lebanon, which Reagan called a Holocaust in private conversations. So that's what I want to see more of. Because as of right now, it just looks like we refuse to pull back on Israel's actions whatsoever, even though
we've limited a lot of what's going on for the invasion of the Gaza Strip. We've condemned them for settlements in the past. I know Obama did. I think Biden might have. But I mean, like, our condemnations they ring a little hollow. It's not like we have.
For me, if there's not internal reviews about how our weapons are being spent and some sort of condition being placed upon our aid, how much leverage do you think just like dialogue with them generally is going to have on their actions?
Just dialogue? For the Gaza Strip stuff, the dialogue seems to have been incredibly successful. I don't think Israel wants to make enemies of the entire fucking world. Like, I think they want to generally remain on the good side of at least the United States. I think that's probably their goal. I just like the idea of like any real conversation happening with just Israel unilaterally just seems to be pretty hollow. Like, I know we can look at one thing right now. Like, here's one thing we can look at right now, which is like, oh, Israel should stop the settlements here, or Israel should do this or that. But like, if they end up doing some particular action and then they get attacked even more, or something like the October 7th shit, that's just going to like further serve in their mind that like, okay, well, fuck the United States, we're not going to listen to them, or fuck everybody pressuring out of this shit. We need to do what we can to defend ourselves, because clearly nobody else has our interests at heart, right? You look at like the UN General Assembly and you look at the voting body of that and you look at all the resolutions and everything against Israel. If we want to have like real conversations here, it can't be like, here's a UN condemning Israel settlement. Okay. It needs to be like it needs to be, wait, here, real quick. Let me finish the point, okay? Because we can go back and forth forever, and you can keep going back and forth if you want. I don't care about bullshit saying Israel needs to stop doing a thing unless we're involving all the parties. If we're not involving all the parties, I don't give a fuck. And I think that all of these are virtue signals. I think it's virtue signal in the actual truest sense of the word, and that it's just other countries saying, we condemn this because it feels good. But everybody knows we're not moving towards a realistic solution. Everybody knows that Israel's not going to act unilaterally against their own interest in an area where they feel like they have other terrorist groups that obviously don't give a fuck about international law. So I think that the conversations need to be real conversations between countries, between groups, with actual mediators and actual treaties being signed, not UN General Assembly resolutions condemning settlement expansion. That's how I feel. And then you can give your point on that if you want. Go.
Okay, so hello, Lagan. First off, I just want to say, when it comes to the settlement expansion in the Golan Heights, I don't think this is just a question about international law, and I think we kind of established this earlier, but I just wanted to make sure it's established. It's also a question of sabotaging future negotiations and making it less safe for everyone down the road, including the settlers, who are going to be putting themselves in harm's way by placing themselves in disputed territory. Disputed territory next to a civil war, disputed territory that terrorists have tried to infiltrate before, disputed territory which is a potential hot rod for conflict in the future. And so I don't think this is just a question of international law, which I do think, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment, should be upheld by the United States if we're going to claim the mantle of some sort of night watchman or encouraging a night watchman in the international system, even if it's just UN interventions. But my point is, though, I don't think it's just a question of international law when it comes to the settlement expansion. I think it's generally going to make everyone less safe in the long run. As for the international law, why would you? I mean, you kind of like said, oh, they're gonna like do a third invasion of Chechnya or something. Why is it so silly, the idea that somebody in the developing world, let's say president of Mozambique, president of wherever it is, looks towards the United States, looks towards the international system, hears them say, we should, respect sovereignty, respect everyone's international borders. We need to respect the international rules-based order, which is the terminology the United States government uses. And then will violate the rules of that order a year later once it suits them. Will they come away with the conclusion that this is an order that we should uphold, or this is all stupid, politics?
I don't know if
cynical,
people look at it as like just like the international rules-based order. I don't think it's just like looked at in terms of like what are the actual international courts saying or whatever, because like technically the USS doesn't even submit itself to the authority of the ICC, right? I think that people are generally looking for...
This is something that I also think is hypocritical and we need to fix.
Sure. Maybe.
I mean,
wait, let me respond to what you said. Hold on. You're doing the ramble. You're talking a lot. Okay, so I'm going to speak a lot. Okay, so I don't believe that Africa aligning itself or disaligning itself with the United States has to do with whether or not we're upholding a rules-based order. Okay, I don't think right now, and I could be wrong. Maybe there are conflicts that I'm not aware of. I know that we were involved in bombing. Is it Sudan or South Sudan? I know there was at least one African country that the United States was involved in decently heavy military intervention in kind of recently. Do you know what I'm thinking of?
You could be talking Chad, maybe Somalia, maybe.
Okay, I can't remember, but just so I don't make the statement completely ignorantly, but like relatively speaking,
Niger?
Oh, it might have been Somalia. Relatively speaking, okay, save for the greater Middle East region, right? Things like Libya or Egypt or whatever, right? The United States doesn't have such heavy involvement in African affairs that they're looking at us and they're like, oh my God, the U.S. isn't upholding rules-based orders, blah, 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 blah. I think they probably have their own motivations and their reasons for supporting who they decide to do. I don't think any of these like decisions are going to be made or broken based on our support or lack thereof for Israel. I don't think that's ever going to be the case.
I remember you talking about Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un negotiating, and how us sitting down with them and giving Kim Jong-un this reputational boost on the world stage was a loss for the United States geostrategically, even if we didn't really technically give them anything outside of a photo op.
Yes.
Now, if something like that can have that type of a disastrous impact on the image of a dictator, do you not think that the number one advocates for the current rules-based system violating the rules of the rules-based system, or at least ignoring when their allies violate the rules of the rules-based system, could not also have a disastrous reputational impact?
No, absolutely not. Where is North Korea on the map? North Korea's issue wasn't just that we were... Yeah, North Korea's issue wasn't just that we legitimized a dictator. It's that we legitimized a guy who was testing like intercontinental ballistic missiles with a potentially... strengthening nuclear program right next to two of our strongest allies, right? South Korea and Japan. That was the big deal with Kim Jong-un, right? Un? That was the huge issue with us legitimizing him there at that particular point in time. It's the fact that we are doing this, and then as we fly our diplomats out, Kim is sending missiles, lobbing them right into the fucking sea, sometimes right over or right next to our allies, and Japan and South Korea is looking at us like, what the fuck are you guys doing? That's the issue with that there. It's their proximity to allies, and it's not just the fact that like, oh, it's Kim, now the United States has been weakened all over, blah, 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 blah. That is like an issue, and I agree with that, but like legitimizing Kim Jong-un, the rationale for that or the reasons for that list is a very short one. That has one thing and one thing only, and that's photo op for Donald Trump. That's far different than support for Israel, which has a far more complicated and tenuous and strange history in that particular region of the world than it would for Kim Jong-un. We can find a lot more re-support Israel than we can take pictures next to Kim.
It's not just, I'm not just saying support Israel as a vague, like, Biden put on like an Israeli flag over his shoulder and said, "Yay, Israel." I'm talking about specifically violations of international law that we refuse to condemn or sometimes enable.
When we say violations of international law, what are we talking about there?
We just talk about like illegal settlement expansion.
I don't even know if that is technically.
It's 100% illegal. We can like sit down and wait and sit down.
My understanding is I think there's one case right now finally that's working its way through the ICJ to determine the legality of this. But the idea of that clearly being illegal, I don't think that has ever been clearly stated to be illegal, because everything relating to this region,
a nation state unilaterally taking another nation state's territory after a military conflict, and then after taking that nation state unilaterally with no international body coming down and saying that yes, this is your territory, or yes, we
wait, but that territory, most of that territory has been renounced. Not the Golan Heights, but the West Bank and the Gaza Strip have been renounced.
We're talking about the Golan Heights right now. I'm talking about this is why I'm so angry about this one in particular. I'm not that angry, but I'm upset about this one in particular because it's such a clear-cut example of the violation of international law. This is why I was against when Donald Trump recognized the annexation, because the reason why previous presidents like Obama and Bush and other administrations didn't recognize the annexation is they knew it was illegal. They knew it would make the United States look bad. It knew it probably would just escalate tensions in the region. And also knew that it was giving Israel something for nothing, which is what Donald Trump did by recognizing the annexation.
I don't necessarily know if I disagree with any of those arguments, but those are all separate from the idea that it is like clearly like an illegal act. I don't know if that is
unilaterally annexing territory and then placing people on that territory or allowing your citizens to settle on that territory is an illegal act.
I don't know if allowing your citizens to settle on territory that you've conquered in a war is illegal. I know forcibly moving your citizens there, I think that text might be there. But again, if this is like clearly and obviously illegal, then show me the body that's like declared it to be clear, that makes rulings like this, that just declared it to be clearly illegal. Like, I don't think the ICJ has made a ruling on this is clearly illegal, or maybe they have and I missed it, in which case I say, oh, well, fuck, it is illegal. And, you know, maybe in support of international law, the United States should take a stronger stance against this. But I don't think that that's the case. Yeah, but if it is, then you just link me. Then show me, oh, the ICJ made this ruling, and they said here. But it's not. It can't be a link to like, here's what a Yale professor said, or here's like somebody's legal opinion on this. If we're saying it's clearly illegal, like it's been ruled upon, like this is like a done deal, I'd be curious to see it. But
would you prefer like a legal, like either like an international institution calling it illegal, or would you prefer the law itself that would be like you cannot unilaterally annex territory, you cannot unilaterally? Which one would you prefer? I mean, we have like 5 minutes left, but I can get it to you
if you want. I don't know if I can make a reading and say, well, I've read this law, now I clearly understand it. I don't know if that's the case.
Would you want me to then have like a legal expert's opinion on the law with it, or what would you want?
Well, why not just get, if it's clearly illegal, why not just like an international ruling on it?
Okay, I can look for an international ruling, but I mean, if I could find a law that is like murder is, you cannot go up and shoot somebody without them posing some threat to you, and I have something that says like you cannot unilaterally annex territory, would that not suffice?
No, but whose international law is that? Is this the ICJ, for the arm of the UN?
Okay, I'll get it to you afterwards.
Sure.
I would have.
I'm curious on this.
I don't know the
let's say that.
legal ruling.
Let's say that.
I've never had anybody.
Sure.
Let me just be clear. The reason why I don't have it on hand is I've never had somebody question the international legality of the annexation of the Golan Heights to me before.
That's great, but I've also had a lot of people say this is illegal, this is illegal, this is illegal. I'm like, oh, illegal how? And I don't know. It just seems bad. Usually, people use illegal as a proxy for bad, right? Let's say, and I'm curious. Let's say that you go, you do look up. Let's say, wait, real quick. Let's say that you do look up the legality of this, and you find out, well, I think this is illegal. I'm like, okay, well, by who? And you say, oh, well, the ICJ says it's legal. Let's say that we look at this and we find out, oh, Israel doesn't submit themselves to their authority, and neither does Syria submit themselves to their authority. Why the fuck would I care what the ICJ even has to say about this? It seems like Syria tried to invade Israel, lost some territory, Israel took it. Then, I mean, like, does an international ruling here even matter? Is it even relevant? Like, even if it was, they don't even have a jurisdiction to rule on the legality of this. So the question of whether or not is it clearly illegal isn't even a relevant part of our computation where we're trying to figure out if they should or shouldn't be there. The legality isn't even a question of it. Sure.
The United Nations Security Council unanimously passed UNSC Resolution 497, which condemned the Israeli actions to change the status of the territory, declaring them null and void and without any international legal effect, and that the Golan remained an occupied territory.
Sure. A Security Council resolution is not a legal declaration. I don't care what the General Assembly.
It was unanimously. Okay, so the UN is not gonna be the body then. What body?
The UN can be the body. The ICJ is the legal arm of the UN that makes legal rulings. A resolution is basically just saying, I don't like this thing, it's not good. But it's not an actual like declared like legal. Well, for instance, let's say that what you just shown me is true, okay? And then let's say that it is legal.
International legal effect. It's not just saying we don't like it. It's
okay. There's no
legal basis.
Okay. Yeah, what is the binding part of this? Like, what is the part that punishes Israel for this? Like, what is the if this is like a truly legally binding thing?
Israel? If something can be illegal and they don't have a means to punish somebody for it, it's illegal to commit genocide. There's no way to punish the Myanmar junta right now on the international stage for it.
Wait, my understanding is there are absolutely ways to punish people for that. That if you're committing
without capturing them, without going in there and getting them.
If you're committing like genocides, or if you're doing acts of war where the ICC is ruling on individuals, the ICJ is ruling on countries, then things like the Security Council comes together and you do actual sanctions. You sanction.
I misunderstood you. You. So what you're saying is that we need some sort of mechanism that will arrest the people who passed the law, and then put them in prison for it to really be illegal. And the UN Security Council resolution doesn't count unless we have that.
This sounds familiar.
Yeah, here's the thing, right? If you want to say like there's a resolution from the UN to condemn a particular thing, that's fine. But the argument means nothing. Nothing has happened from it. Nothing is going to happen from it. It doesn't inform what you're... Wait, no, let me finish. You talk so much, okay? Nothing is going to happen from it. Nothing is being enforced by it. Nobody is doing anything about it. There's no sanctions coming from the United Nations over it. It's a bunch of people getting together saying like, oh, I think this thing is kind of wrong, which they do like every fucking 2 months for some shit that Israel does. Then it doesn't matter. It's not. This is not a strong argument for anything. That if we wanted to look at the Golan Heights and we wanted to criticize Israel's actions there, we might criticize it on not upholding norms. We might criticize it on endangering their citizens. We might criticize it on threatening the territorial integrity of another country and blah, blah, blah. There are all these things we could do. But saying it's illegal is like not even on the list because it's meaningless because the jurisdiction is questionable at best here. And two, there's not even a real legal body that's decided on this. The jurisdiction.
What are you talking about?
What do you mean? What am I talking about?
I'm so confused. Okay, number one, we were debating the legality of it, not because now you're saying the legality is kind of worthless anyway.
Wait, no, wait, hold on. Well, wait, legality, jurisdiction is an integral part of legality. Do you understand that?
Okay, so what? Okay, wait. What jurisdiction am I missing? What jurisdiction issue am I missing here? Because as far as I'm aware, Israel is a UN country. It's recognized under the UN. It bases its nation state status off of UN resolution. So
yeah, but they don't sign on to like the Rome Statute. They're not part of the ICC. They're not signatories to that. I don't know if the ICJ has established a jurisdictional reason to make a ruling on this, which is why it's probably just a UN resolution and not actually like a ruling from the ICJ. That's although there is one right now that's working its way through the ICJ. I think it's about the West Bank. I could be wrong on that, but no, a General Security Council resolution. It would be like you saying this is clearly illegal in the United States. And you go, well, how do you know that? And you say, well, because the House of Representatives has passed.
Then, if we use this logic, then Russia's kidnapping of Ukrainian children isn't really illegal because the International Criminal Court, which is trying to pursue Vladimir Putin, doesn't have legal jurisdiction over Russia.
My understanding, my knowledge on this is very recent. My understanding is that if you are a signatory or if you sign on to or allow the ICJ to delegate issues, so if Ukraine goes to the ICJ and they say we want to do this, that your unilateral acceptance there, I think, gives you the right to take other nations, I think, to the court as long as
they have jurisdiction over territory in Ukraine. They have jurisdiction over crimes committed in Ukraine, but the Russian state does not allow it to have jurisdiction over territory controlled by Russia.
Okay, well, has this been? Is this a war crime?
I mean, yes, the stealing of children is a war crime, yeah.
Okay, can you show me that, where that ruling has been made?
I don't have the kidnapping children war crime law on hand, but I'm sure if you give me a few hours, I could find it.
Okay, I understand we're getting caught up in a lot of like whatever jargon bullshit here, okay? And I think, broadly speaking, I broadly agree with you, but when we're talking about matters of like, is it legal or is it illegal? I think we have to be like very specific to what we mean when we say those things. Russia kidnapping children is wrong. I agree with that. But in terms of like the legality or the jurisdiction or whatever, I don't know if it's meaningful.
It is illegal for any occupying state to take children and move them to their own state. The international legal standard is that you're supposed to take the children and move them to a third state if the question of their safety is the issue.
Sure. Okay, so here's here. Okay, so here's this. Moving through the ICJ right now, then it seems like Ukraine has said, hey, we do believe this is illegal. They're making allegations of genocide, I guess, under the Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, and they are working that case through the ICJ then, because they feel like they do have a legal standing for it. The ICJ has jurisdiction to hear this case.
Because on their territory, but the International Criminal Court does not have control of Russia, doesn't have jurisdiction in Russia. And so they're not going to be able to take any of those people, bring them before
sure,
court
they might not be to
travel outside of Russia.
They might not be to, but because Ukraine, I think, submits itself to the authority of the ICJ, Ukraine can make the request for this to be litigated there. I don't think that Syria has done that.
I don't think I have no clue if Syria has done that specifically with the ICJ. But whether or not they've done it with the ICJ does not change that the kidnapping of children is illegal, just like the unilateral annexation of territory is illegal.
Well, no, hold on, because if somebody specifically says I'm not signing on to these rules because I don't want to play by them, they can't reference that rule book when they get fucked by somebody else. That's why I'm saying the jurisdiction here is really important. Israel hasn't. I don't believe Syria has either. So for either of them, like for instance, here's what I would say if you want, I guess like for me to be charitable on your end, if somebody were to invade Israel and start taking some of their territory and settle shit, if Israel were to say all of a sudden, hold on, UN criminal courts, I need you to come and defend us. This is bullshit. Rule, this is illegal. I would say very clearly, Israel, obviously you haven't signed yourself up to be under this jurisdiction of these courts in the past for any of this. You can't do this now. Fuck you. You have no right to do this, right? So of course.
Okay. Give me a second. I'm going to find the specific things, but Israel does fall under the UN Charter, right?
It does fall under the UN Charter, but I believe the ICJ needs to make a specific argument for why they would have jurisdiction over a particular reason, or over a particular situation. And I think let me see, I wrote these down earlier today. It would have to be either a special agreement that had been made between states to litigate an issue, some sort of compromissory clause. So there's a contract or a treaty that had been made between two people that says the UN can, or the ICJ can eventually litigate, or something having to do with an optional clause declaration, which is Article 38 says that states can make a unilateral declaration allowing anyone to submit cases against them in the ICJ. So they go to the ICJ, listen, we want to be able to take cases to you, but other people have to be able to submit cases to us with that declaration. I don't believe, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think, I'm almost positive Israel submitted that. I don't think Syria has either.
What if I said that, what if it was Israel's Supreme Court that ruled it as illegal? Would that be fine? Could I use that?
Yeah, I would say it's illegal in Israel, and they obviously shouldn't do it for the Israeli Supreme Court. Should then? Yeah, I would say that, sure.
Okay. I can try to get that for you then. But sure. I mean, I don't have the specific UN resolution on the acquisition of territory by force unilaterally before me. I'm positive that is illegal. We can pursue this conversation at a different time if you want. I've taken up a lot of your time, and I know there's other people that want to come on.
It's always fun.
The other question I did want to ask you before we go out of here is about the success of the operation.
Which operation?
Whether the Israeli operation into the Gaza Strip, the invasion, the attempted holding of territory. How do you? I mean, I know neither of us are experts on this, but do you think that the Israeli government do you think this operation has a chance of, like, a real chance of success in what the Israeli government is setting out to do? Or do you think this is an example of the Israeli government doing something to do something because there has to be a response to what happened on October 7th?
This is my feeling on things, and people are saying I'm wrong, and I've already said I've been proved wrong, so maybe I have been. My feeling on things is, one, completely eliminating Hamas is probably not ever going to happen. I don't think it can. Well, it can, but it would be like at great cost to civilian life. So number one. Number two, I think the civilian casualties are going to reach a rate that I don't even know if Israel's going to finish their southern Gaza invasion, or even do it, although people are saying they're already prepared for that. So in that case, it's going to be a big invasion into the Gaza Strip. I don't believe they're going to eliminate Hamas. I don't think they can do that. And they're going to walk out, probably how Putin, was thinking for a while he was going to have to walk. It's like, oh, well, we did it. We beat Hamas, and then we walk away, and it's going to be fucked. Yeah. So I don't think it's going to accomplish good things for Israel necessarily. I don't think. But I don't know. Their political position is going to be strange too, because like if you do nothing, your citizens, your far right factions are going to go fucking insane. But yeah, I don't think it's a. I don't know. My current feeling is that it's not a good operation for Israel. I don't think so. I think it should have been like they've done the other ones. Operation whatever the fuck. They send in some tanks, they blow some shit up, and they pull out. But this like full-scale invasion shit is going to be like, it's so many. Like if the civilian casualties start climbing past like 30, 40, 50K, it's like, that's like unbelievable. But I'm not sure.
I mean, the 6,000 bombs in the first 6 days, I think really like set the tone for how like brutal of an invasion it was going to be. I really think that they're just doing this to kind of do something. I know that I do think they have a general goal of damaging and or destroying Hamas. I do think that there is an attempt to take over the Gaza Strip so it cannot be used as a base to attack Israel in the future. But I don't think that I don't think anything has changed between now and the war in Lebanon. in how Israel fights or what the government is going to do is going to change many of the same problems that they ran into when governing the Gaza Strip before, or many of the same problems they had before when trying to fight in these types of urban environments in southern Lebanon. I don't have a high estimation of how this is going to go for the Israelis, so it's very hard for me to at all align myself in favor of an occupation and or any sort of like ground invasion past what they've done at this point.
So what are you asking? If it was a question essentially just like, are they doing something to do something? Is that still the?
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
I think they have to do something because they feel like they need to do something, right? The leadership probably feels pressure. Like even the average Israeli citizen wants them to do something. But like, did it have to be this? Probably not this.
No, I don't think so either. I think this is just going to end up getting a lot more people killed, and I don't think it's going to fix any of the underlying issues that caused the violence in the first place.
Yeah, I think I largely agree. Yeah. I think the biggest feeling that I have, I don't know if anybody shares this opinion, so I might just be retarded and be alone on this, but like I feel like Israel needs to do a really good job at not angering the rest of the Arab world, because over the past like 30 or 40 years, the biggest boon to Israel's security has been other Arab countries essentially like saying like, okay, fuck it, we'll like make peace and deal with you, fuck it. Like, and if the problem is that like I think the leadership is warmer on Israel than the actual citizens are, but if the citizens start to get so ass pained that Israel is killing so many fucking people, eventually the leadership is going to have to roll over. It's like, okay, sorry, like we're not going to work with you. And then Israel has now lost all of its progress that it's made in shoring up alliances or friendships in the region because of some unhinged operation, you know?
So you think that Israel is going to undermine its ability to come to a settlement with the Arab world through this operation in the long run?
It could. If like more than like 20, 30, 40,000 people die, yeah, I think that would be really, really, really bad for Israel.
Yeah, I largely agree. I don't think that Saudi Arabia or any of these Arab states in the long run that were already on the trajectory of normalization with Israel are going to permanently dislodge themselves from that path in order to make a moral stand here, because quite frankly, and I have a very low opinion of the many of the governments surrounding, honestly, all of the governments surrounding Israel. But I do think for at least the short term, it is going to have a negative impact. And it's a question of how Israel responds, what the Palestinian groups do, that I think will determine how long that delay is. And it's part of the reason why I really want to stop the settlement expansion, because it's such, I think it's just more barriers when there's already so many issues. It's just, I think, the worst possible thing you could add to the situation.
Sure. Yeah, the settlements definitely aggravate everything. I don't necessarily disagree with that, yeah.
Okay, dope. I think we talked about everything I wanted to talk about.
Okay. Well, I love you, buddy. Stay safe. Be careful. You said you're here for 4 more months?
Yeah, I leave mid-March, then I go back.
Okay, well, good luck.
Oh,
Stay
there was
safe.
one. I
Yeah?
forgot one last thing. I'm sorry. I forgot this last thing. Do you think we should join the International Criminal Court?
My gut says yes, but I'm sure the United States has its reasons for not wanting to.
The thing that really killed me on it recently was I believe what the United States did in assisting the ICC in its investigation into the kidnapping of Ukrainian children was good. I think it's providing that intelligence, helping them in conducting the investigation was good. I do think, though, and again, this is my issue with hypocrisy, that it is hypocritical for the United States to help the ICC investigate a non-member country of the ICC. It's basically stating that it's moral for them to do so, or at least implicitly by doing it, while also not being a member state of the ICC. If you want one nation state to be held to the standards of the International Criminal Court, I think it'd be good if it would at least look better if we also held ourselves to those same standards.
You keep saying that, but I'm not sure if that's the case. Like, does the United States complain like, we want you to be held to the ICC standards, or does the US just go in and fuck your shit up when it thinks you do something bad?
Well, the United States is trying to hold Russia to the ICC standards because that's the institution that's going after them for kidnapping children. And if we're holding them to one institution saying you should be held to the authority of this institution, but we shouldn't, I do think that's hypocritical. Because the ICC has tried to launch investigations to American troop actions in Afghanistan, and we have dodged those. In fact, Trump placed sanctions on ICC investigators.
Well, we
for
didn't. To
particularly
be
looking
clear, the United States will never explicitly doesn't submit itself to the ICC's jurisdiction. I'm pretty sure we have a. I think there was an act or something passed in Congress where if the ICC were to take U.S.
They
soldiers,
called it the Hague Invasion Act. Yeah.
Yeah, we would literally invade the ICC and take our people back.
I think the act should be removed, and we should adopt it. I mean, Bill Clinton, at least there was at least an agreement to like the spirit of the institution. We assisted in the creation of it. Clinton signed it. The Senate never ratified it. And so there seemed to be an agreement while the system was being built after the collapse of the Soviet Union that we should also apply these standards to ourselves. It's just then we were like, damn, we're gonna have to apply the standard to ourselves, and we didn't want to do it.
Well, hold on. Not only that, but I'm pretty sure that these standards would be in violation of U.S. constitutional law as well, right? I think that was a big issue that we would have to actually amend our constitution to give superseding like international law.
I remember the main issue largely was the idea of we wanted to be able to do this ourselves. We wanted American soldiers and American personnel to fall under American legal jurisdiction. We wanted to resolve it ourselves, while the International Criminal Court could usurp the process. But my problem with that is
hold on, you're saying we wanted to do it ourselves. It's not that we wanted to. It's that constitutionally that is what our constitution calls for. The idea that you could commit a crime on U.S. soil against somebody else and some superseding international body would come in and rule on that is a violation of your constitutional rights as an American citizen. So the only way to submit yourself to some higher international authority would be an amendment.
I don't think it violates. I mean, I think that there's an argument to be said that it doesn't violate the constitution. I mean, maybe it does. I don't think it violates the spirit of it, because the International Criminal Court doesn't come in and do the ruling every time or do the investigation every time, no matter what crime was occurred. It is the last resort. It comes in and does it if nobody else will, which I think having that type of barrier as a check on the United States government is important, considering that governments.
I understand what you're saying, but it's nonsense. You can't. The United States government and the Constitution is not going to allow a supranational body to have a check on it. That doesn't make any sense. In the United States, if you're a citizen, the Constitution is the ultimate authority that you submit yourself to, and then the U.S. courts. The idea that some like uber national court or international court is going to make a ruling on that contradicts or contravenes your American civil rights, that just can't happen under U.S. law.
Do you think that? Okay, well, let me see this for a moment. Do you think that American law should change to make it so we could allow American citizens to be tried under these types of bodies?
That's a really hard question, and I think I could be persuaded either way. I think I could be. My gut would say yes, but I could see good arguments going the other way as well. But I don't have a strong opinion on that. I haven't thought about that a lot. Should international law supersede on U.S. soil? I don't know. If I wasn't an American, I'd probably say yes. If I lived in a smaller country. But if I live in the United States, like if I do something wrong here in this country, I like the idea that I'm a subject of my country and then my constitution and my country's laws. The idea that another international body could rule on that feels not good.
I guess for me, the thing that bothers me with the International Criminal Court is that when they're trying to launch investigations to U.S. troop actions in Afghanistan, right? So we're not talking about actions on U.S. soil. We're talking about actions on Afghan soil. In Afghanistan, well, the previous Afghan government while we were there, the ANA, they were a member of the International Criminal Court. And so there was a question about whether U.S. soldiers could be brought under the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, and it became a hot button issue over that. I don't think they ever found any like actual misdeeds by American soldiers, but the question of even an investigation prompted a very negative response out of Trump.
I feel like for international actions, I feel like the United States needs to coalition build and should submit itself to some sort of international authorities. I think that's important, but I know that gets complicated. For instance, like the fact that we do certain NATO missions instead of doing these as like UN missions is because obviously with, permanent members on the Security Council, there are going to be some countries that you could never take action against regardless of what they do, right? So this has to be a NATO mission versus a UN mission. Or the idea that there might be certain things that we would declare crimes, but like the UN won't hold a certain party accountable because of, the permanent veto power, right? Like, here's a question. I'm totally ignorant of this, and I should know this. Like, did the UN ever make explicit charges or formal declarations, or the ICJ make rulings, or the ICC do anything about Bashar al-Assad during the whole 2013, the Syrian civil war?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, I'd have to go back and check explicitly, but I remember so. But it was all like, we condemn.
Yeah, I don't mean just name resolutions. Fuck resolutions, yeah. So that's what I mean. So, like, if none of these people are...
Actually, I believe there's this is recent. There was a warrant put out for Assad's arrest a week ago. I think I know somebody who worked on that. I could get you an article about that.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be curious how that works.
There's a French court.
Because I know that, like, if Russia, for instance, I'm curious. Oh, I need to learn the structure of these. I don't know if the UN Security Council can, like, thumbs down ICJ rulings or how that works. Because if that's the case, then a Security Council permanent member is always going to be able to veto any investigations into, like, somebody they would consider an ally, right? So I don't know how the International Court of Justice intersects with the UN Security Council, but yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to check. Yeah.
It's like an ICJ Assad, and I'll look up the French court thing. French Assad. Yep, France issues arrest warrant for Assad. He ain't going to Paris anytime soon.
France issues an arrest warrant for Assad. This was recent. Wonder why. Over the alleged use of banned chemical. Yeah, but was this for a French
so this is
law?
2012, 2013.
Oh, what? The article I'm reading is from 20.
The
article I'm reading real quick is from 2023.
Yeah, no, the only reason I'm mentioning it is because it was recent news and I remember it. I'm looking for the ICJ, anything on... Oh, look at this. ICJ to begin hearing on Assad regime's crime. This is this year. Woo!
Interesting.
It's 10 years late, but
can so something I'm curious about is, can a UN Security Council permanent member, veto ICJ investigation?
I have no idea. I'm just gonna plead ignorance.
I thought it was only certain states had veto power.
Well, yeah, but Russia would
so.
obviously veto anything relating to Assad, would be my guess. But
but it hasn't happened, so I don't think they can. They would have if they could have.
Maybe, yeah. Or maybe there are some cases that are so fucked up that, even Russia or China are like, But
I mean, Russia used UN data in Syria to bomb the hospitals. They got the data from the UN where the hospitals were and then bombed them. I doubt it's a question of this is so fucked up we have to admit it.
Well, let me be more expanded. When I say it's so fucked up, what I mean is there's not much strategic interest in like vying or vouching for a particular person. So they say, we either abstain from voting and we whatever. Yeah. But yeah,
there are only 5 that can veto: U.S., China, France, Russia.
That's actually a good question. Do you think America could have abstained from that vote instead of voting against it?
Probably not, because we want to probably show historically we've supported Israel and we probably want to continue to show support for Israel. But I'm not sure.
Do you think there's a threshold where you'd want them to stop doing that?
No, there's no threshold. I think if Israel was infinitely raping 5 billion Palestinian women, the United States should still support them.
Well, I just don't know if the illegal settlements is not the threshold. I just don't know what the threshold would be.
It would probably be an excess number of civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip. Like, obviously, anything related to excess number of civilian casualties in any part of controlled territories, is
well, settlement would not be far enough for you, but death of civilians would be if it's disproportionate enough.
I don't even know if disproportionate. It's just going to be arbitrary numbers. Like 10,000 feels bad, 20,000 feels bad, 30,000 feels bad. People say throw around disproportionate, but I don't know, like proportionate to what? I don't even know what you would compare it towards.
Well, this is the problem with proportionality is like each state ends up determining it for itself. But the general rule of thumb is supposed to be that the civilian death toll cannot exceed the strategic benefit to the state. For example,
yeah, but those are calculations that are made in Israeli military bunkers.
Yeah,
and I don't know if we have access to that decision. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I need to go pee real quick.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, talk to you. Thank you for talking to me. Have a nice one.
Stay safe.